All right, so let's talk about the development of transnational capital. All right, so there have been 4 distinct stages. Let's look at them. These 4 distinct stages are Venice, Dutch Republic, England, and what's the last one, guys? Come on. America, right? Okay, so these 4 places are special because they are all merchant oligarchies. Okay? Merchant oligarchies, meaning that they are controlled by private interests. Private interests. Now, I understand that in school you're taught that America's a democracy and England's a democracy and all that. No, guys, it's all nonsense. These are oligarchies. They're controlled by private interests. They've always been controlled by private interests. They're still controlled by private interests today. Okay? And the way that these private interests, what they do to maintain control over their people and the world is through 3 mechanisms, okay? The first is banking. Banking just means that these oligarchs are pooling their resources together in order to extract energy from the world. Now, the thing about banking that's very important is that if you're able to bank in a certain way, you're able to extract energy across time and space, right? You're able to borrow money from the future and spend it today. Does that make sense? Okay, and this will happen with the abstraction of capital. All right, so banking is basically extract time and space. You're extracting energy from across time and space. Okay, I'll explain more as we go along. Okay. Second is the idea of a navy, where you're controlling trade. And the third is diplomacy. The idea of diplomacy is you don't want to fight wars because your population is very limited. What you want to do is trick other people into fighting wars for you. Okay? You want to have these trade negotiations. So it's like spying, intelligence. All right? And in all 4, what's really important is that if you're a merchant oligarchy, you're actually controlled by a secret society. Okay? Not a king, but by a secret society. Because otherwise, how else can these merchants get along with each other, okay? So secret societies is what allows them to work together to plan and control their populations. Now, what's going to happen is this. Venice is one of the early oligarchies, but with each iteration, it's going to improve in power. Why? Because by the time we get from Venice to England and the Dutch Republic, we have something called the Protestant Reformation. Okay? So what I will do is explain to you what the Protestant Reformation is. The Protestant Reformation radically changes how we see ourselves and our relationship with God, which makes transnational capital much more powerful. And then what's going to happen is, by the time we hit England, we go from England to America, we have the Enlightenment. Okay? And when we hit the Enlightenment, what's going to happen is, by getting rid of God, we turn money into God. And when this happens, transnational capital becomes all-powerful. All right? So, remember what's happening is we have Venice, then the Dutch Republic becomes more powerful than Venice because it adopts the ideas of the Protestant Reformation. And then America becomes more powerful than England because it adopts the ideas of the Enlightenment. What's happening throughout this process is transnational capital is becoming much more abstract and therefore much more powerful. Okay, and therefore much more capable of extracting energy from the population. All right, so let's go over the Protestant Reformation. All right. The Catholics and the Protestants. So there are 3 major differences between the Catholics and the Protestants. Okay. So the Catholics have 3 basic ideas, right? There's orthodoxy, there's hierarchy, and there's justification by works. All right? So the idea is, hey, if you want to go to heaven, just obey the Catholic Church, what the priest tells you. Don't think, just do what the priest tells you to do. Really simple, right? Okay, but there are 3 problems with all this, okay? The first problem is God becomes distant from you, okay? You're not allowed to communicate with God. And as I keep on saying in this class, we humans are first and foremost religious. We want to be spiritual. We want to have communion with God. But the Catholic Church says, no, you have to just obey us, okay? You have to obey our dogma, even though our dogma doesn't really make much sense, okay? The idea of hierarchy, of course, leads to corruption, where the priests can do whatever they want because they're in power, okay? And they become extremely wealthy and powerful. And the third problem, just justification by works, is it leads to hypocrisy. You can be the worst person in the world, but hey, as long as you give enough money to the Catholic Church, you go to heaven, guys, okay? All right? So that's why the Protestants hated the Catholic Church. And so they proposed a new system. All right? The new system is, first of all, direct access. You don't have to go through the priest anymore. You don't have to listen to the dogma of the church. You can just actually communicate with the God directly through the Bible. Okay? Second idea is egalitarian, where there is no longer any hierarchy. You can communicate with God directly. Okay? And the third idea is justification by faith. Okay. The problem, though, of course, is that these 3 solutions to the Catholic problem will create more problems. Okay? The first is the idea of direct access. So you can access God directly. The problem is that Christians believe in the Holy Trinity. Okay, the Holy Trinity, right? God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are different but the same. Okay? Separate but co-equal. It makes no sense whatsoever. And as such, if you're trying to access yourself, you can't do it because this precludes you, okay? It is impossible for you to insert yourself into the story of the Holy Trinity. If it was just Jesus, you could talk to Jesus, but how do you talk to Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit at the same time? You can't do it, okay? So this causes confusion, okay? Second problem is the idea of egalitarian. This causes just so much chaos, debate and chaos, right? Because now, hey, if I want to, I can start my own religion. I don't need to get people to agree with me. I need to start my own religion and have followers follow me, okay? So this causes a lot of debate within the Protestant religion. It still happens today where among the Protestants, there are like thousands and thousands of different branches, okay? The last problem is most problematic, justification by faith. This creates anxiety, right? Because if you don't really know God because of the Holy Trinity, how do you know you really believe in God? Right? The Catholics believe that all you do is give some money, do some good work, don't sin, and you go to heaven. But the Protestants believe that, no, you have to really believe in God in order to go to heaven. Okay? What's even worse is that another reformer named John Calvin, he proposed the idea of double predestination. Because the Catholic Church says, you know what? Only we can decide who goes to heaven. So if you disobey us, you'll burn in hell. And John Calvin, to respond to this, says, no, no, no. The Catholic Church has no power over anyone because God, at the beginning of time, has already decided who will go to heaven and who will go to hell, okay? Double predestination. It's already been decided, guys. And how do you know? The solution is through energy, right? If you work hard and you make a lot of money, you become very wealthy, then you know that God favors you. But after you become very wealthy, what's really important is for you to understand you can't spend any of this money because you can't sin. Okay? So you can only invest the money. All right, as you can understand, the merchant oligarchies love this because now they're taking people's money and they're able to invest it in any way they want. It's all going to the bank. Okay? And this is the Dutch Republic. This creates the Dutch Republic, which becomes the wealthy society in Europe at this time in the 17th century. Okay? All right? Any questions so far? Okay? So what's going to happen though is by the time you go from England to America, okay, England's also Protestant. The Protestant Reformation is going to change to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is, there may be a God, but God doesn't really interfere in the universe. God lets us do whatever we want. Okay, so it's up to us to create our own world. So now that God has left, what happens is you need something to replace the God, right? This becomes money, okay? Money as God. And this works because if you insert money into the Protestant faith, it solves a lot of problems. It solves a problem of anxiety because how do you know you go to heaven? If you become very wealthy. Okay? And everyone, how do you know you're favored by God? Whoever becomes the wealthiest, okay? So money becomes the new religion of America. And this is what ultimately leads to the triumph of transnational capitalism, okay?